Today is December 24th, 2020, day before Christmas, so anyone listening to this presentation, Merry Christmas. My name is Charles Suter. Today I'm presenting part 6 of my series of change presentations. This one is titled Input Management. My main message here is goals are achieved by managing your inputs. Just want to remind you that change is a goal until you achieve it. Now, no matter what you want from life, you can only control so much of the conditions necessary for success. And unless you can control 100% of all the necessary and sufficient conditions that are necessary for successful change, or again to reach any goal, there's a chance that the outcome might be less than what you would desire. To achieve a successful outcome, or goal, you must direct your time and effort to supplying as many of the inputs required of the desired outcome as possible. If you are successful in supplying all of the necessary inputs for a particular outcome, you will succeed. If you supply less than what is necessary, you may only achieve part or none of the outcome you desire. Change, my proposition 1 here, change requires goals which are achieved by your inputs. Actually, goals and or change require two elements. They require a process and they require the inputs demanded by that process. You can control both. You get to pick the process and you get to supply the inputs. While you can't always control the outcomes, you can control the inputs and or the process that you select. For every input, there will be an output, including feedback, which you can use judiciously to re-scope and redefine the inputs. For every feedback, you can use that information to guide you towards your goal. Once you realize that goal achievement depends upon your inputs, only some of which you can control, you can begin to actively and intentionally manage them. You might begin the quest for change by talking with experts, defining an efficient process, which is the means for converting your inputs to the change you seek, or by gathering information to help you create an action plan for sequencing your inputs. Once you've completed all the necessary and sufficient inputs in the quest for your goal, you should have achieved your desired change. But if you don't get the results you intended, there are probably some missing inputs. Use the feedback you gain along the way as guidance for finding and providing the missing inputs. Recommend you use any morally correct inputs that will move you closer to your goal. Proposition 2. You can avoid bad outcomes by finding better processes for change. There are always many means to an end or to achieve a change or reach a goal. So look for and find an efficient process. Do your homework and find the better ways to reach any desired end. And finally, learn from all the feedback you gain along the way from your inputs and correct your action plan as necessary. The means to achieve any end, as I said before, is a process. So always seek to find the best process that both minimizes the inputs required and yields the best chances of success. Always be learning from your mistakes. The change and process will determine the inputs required. Work on those inputs. Proposition 3. Judge your successes by your inputs, not your outputs. Judge yourself by what you can control, which is your inputs, and contribute them towards a worthy goal. Don't judge yourself by uncontrollable outcomes. Judge yourself instead by what you learn and apply in correcting for any less than outcomes. The stigma of failure rests heavily on a person's self-image and their self-esteem. And for that reason, many people avoid change or setting goals just because there is a risk of failure. However, if you put forth your best efforts in supplying all the inputs required to achieve a desired outcome, you have not failed. You have succeeded in supplying what you control, your inputs. You are a success. Take pride in doing what you can control, which is your inputs, and doing them to the best of your ability. He who fails is the one who has no goals or does not try to reach them. My final message: you change by managing your inputs. The only way to change is to supply all the inputs demanded by the laws of nature to effect the change you desire. If you supply these inputs, you should succeed, unless there are other hidden inputs that you didn't supply. By learning as you go and heeding lessons learned, you can discover and perhaps influence the other inputs necessary for success. Ultimately, the way to effect change is to manage your inputs and correct your inputs by what you learn from your outcomes along the way. That's all for now. Remember to stay positive. You'll be happier, healthier, and live longer.